Hey there, it's Anonymous Tea, where we spill the tea here anonymously. Hello, 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 everyone. Hello, YouTubers. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day. Today, I am discussing the entirety of season 4 of Too Hot to Handle, and I have some thoughts, you guys. We're just gonna go down the list one by one. Sophie and Creed, I never thought that they were really into each other like that, and I think over time, Sophie developed more feelings for Creed than Creed ever had for her. I think essentially Creed was always looking for the next best thing, right? And as a result of that, it finally came into, showing his true colors with the whole Flavia situation and how he played Sophie with that, and then trying to juggle Flavia and Imogen. And I felt it dragged on a little bit longer than it needed to. I felt that Sophie needed to be dumped from the island a long time ago. However, I think once she started bringing some spice with the Creed situation, they wanted to keep her on a little bit longer because she was giving the producer something. As for Creed, I didn't like his fakeness, right? But at the same token, his drama was also entertaining, right? But it wasn't fair how he was doing Flavia and Imogen, though. He needed to decide, and he was both telling them both what they wanted to hear, which was he was done with the other, which was not true. So there is that. But I am glad that, Lana just said, you know what, skip it. You're out of here. Also, what happened to Nigel? He was main character and then completely turned into furniture, you guys. Like, literally after the first episode and a half. I think, it was interesting how all of these men were all in on Kayla and, really just were not, giving anyone else the time of day, with the exception of Nick. Nick was always all in on Jawa from the start, you guys. But it was like this thing where, again, Nigel was trying to be a player too, right? He was trying to talk to her, he was trying to talk to Dominique, and ultimately those worlds collided, right? And so then after that, Nigel just fell back, right? We really didn't see him other than, just broing and dapping up, the other people in the villa. I actually was surprised that they kept Nigel for as long as they did, considering he had no storyline, and neither did Dominique, really. We did not know, like, if they were pursuing anybody else or what their journeys were after that. And so I don't understand the purpose of just keeping people just to keep people. If they're not on a journey at all, right? Because I thought the whole point of this was to have people who were like focused only on physical connections and having sex with people, to then switch gears and do some introspective, work and become, more about getting to know their partners emotionally and, with intention and everything else to see if they're truly compatible. So that's why I felt like half the people, they could have just brought in more singles to see if there were any other singles that had a connection. And they should have let go of the gentleman with the tats that came in for Sophie. And once he was rejected by everybody, I think he stayed on a little bit too long as well. Also, with Britain, I grew to like Britain. She was really fun, towards the end of the show, and she became a really good friend to Jawa, which I really appreciated. She was like a really good, her and had really good words of wisdom for Jawa and everything else when it came to her situation. I felt bad for Britain for most of the show because basically James was not interested, you guys. I don't care what he says, right? I don't care what he says. He reminded me of, I believe his name was Kelvin from season 1, where he was all focused in on about the money. All he cared was about, keeping the money in the pot, as much money in there as possible. And it wasn't until, Britain, started to mess with another guy to make him jealous that all of a sudden he wants to come back around and, then start to invest in Britain, when she's told him a number of times that she likes physical touch, she likes, intimacy and having a physical connection, and he basically was not interested. He was not interested in her at all. I think deep down he still was hoping that there could be a shot with Kayla. I don't know, but something was just not there. And so it'll be interesting to see whether or not they're still together. Also, Kayla and Seb, oh my gosh, they were so stressful, you guys. They were so stressful, and the typical runner-up that you guys see on these reality shows, right? So let's keep it a buck, you guys. Seb was Kayla's second choice, right? She was all in on Nigel, and she revealed later in the episodes that her type is black men. So therefore, but she didn't want to look like a fool, right? Continuing to go after Nigel after Dom exposed that basically he was two-timing them. So instead, she went all in on Seb, so much to the point that she got insecure over a simple date with Flavia. She could not wait until, Seb got back to find out what actually took place. She just had an immediate meltdown because they were holding hands, you guys. And it's like, were they making out? Did I miss something? Because I don't remember that taking place, right? And it just was very weird behavior, and nothing, even when, Seb basically told her, hey, nothing really went down, she's still like, oh, I need to seal the deal as his girl and have sex with him and blow $40,000, you guys. Make it make sense as to why the first thing that you think of is something physical, something lacking substance that was going to, secure Seb, right? And then it was funny because when the tables were turned, while Seb did not have a meltdown over Kayla being on a date, he did press that button, you guys. He did press that button to stop that massage from taking place or what have you. So there is that. But they're, like I said, they're the perfect second place couple that happens on these reality shows all the time, where production pushes them like they're going to be the winner of the show. And then they do these grand gestures like, oh my gosh, we're boyfriend and girlfriend and X, Y, and Z. And they give them, one of the top dates at the end of the show to really push like, hey, we think that you guys are going to win. But really, that's not the case, right? Really, they are runner-ups. And what I found from just talking to different reality stars about that is what'll happen is they'll see another couple. And in this instance, it would have been Nick and Jawa, to where they're not getting the screen time that they actually deserve, but technically are considered, mom and dad of the villa, right? Are the ones that everybody is going to, are the ones that are spending all this time together, have the most genuine connection and everything else. But the edit is going to show us a couple that, has, all of the physical attraction, all the sexual attention, and all of that over something that is more intellectual, something of substance, more emotional. As a result of that, people assume that Kayla and Seb were the stronger couple, but not necessarily, because I felt that the breakdowns when each of them had dates with other people was very disturbing, was like worse than what happened with Nick and Jawa, because they were both still trying to, they both were still trying to see if they had it, right? They both were still trying to see how long they could push the temperature of a tempter and then ultimately go back to each other, right? So it wasn't a full growing experience that they're trying to sell to us, right? So there's that, because at the first moment of insecurity, they think that they have to do something physical to secure something, right? So let's move on finally to Nick, Jawa, and Sean, you guys. So I felt bad for Jawa because she seems like somebody who prefers black men, right? But the problem is, on these reality shows, these black men that they cast are not into black women. I don't care what they say, you guys. I don't care if they've had a black girlfriend in the past. They specifically want, Latina. They want somebody biracial or a white woman or what have you. They do not want these black women. And literally, I was so frustrated with Jawa because I was like, stop chasing these guys. Stop chasing them. They're not interested. And it really pissed me off because it had to take Seb and Nick to tell the black men in the villa that Jawa was sexy, that she was attractive, that she had all these things going for her, for then the black men to finally chime in and be like, oh, yeah. And even with Sean, you choose Kayla for the date. Whether or not that's producer influence doesn't matter. You still were doing the most on the date, right? And then when you find out basically that she's still going to go back to Seb, then you're like, oh, well, I love my black queens. No. When people say they love their black queens, that's a red flag. That is a red flag. That is hotep foolishness. No. You went out with your preference. I'm sorry, sir. You went out with your preference. Now, you ended up not being as much of a hot mess as, as it played out, right? You ended up being a gentleman. You didn't show your behind or whatever else. So for that, that's decent. However, I would have to, see how you would have moved if you came into the villa from the start. right? Because I feel like this would have been the same conversation that you would have been with Nigel and everybody else, and Creed and everybody else who was after Kayla and wanted Kayla, right? I feel like that would have been the case, and you wouldn't have been after Jawa until Kayla ultimately chose Nigel and then ultimately chose Sep, right? So there's that. Nick from the beginning was all in on Jawa, you guys. He was all in on Jawa, and really just waited it out to for her to sort out her feelings for Nigel, and then he was just still continuing to reject her, and then seeing her sort out whatever it was going to be with Seb. And again, I think they were just each other's backup plan until they could get the person that they want. And then Nick swoops in with those eyes, and he's just really intently interested in Jawa, only interested in Jawa, hyping her up, just really trying to build on the emotional intimacy and everything else. And it was so wonderful to watch, you guys. It was so wonderful to watch them blossom, because he was absolutely crazy about her. He was absolutely crazy about her. He was singing about her. He was meditating about her. And, and he was inviting her into his world, into his daily meditations and everything else that is, of what he's about, right? So I loved their connection. It was a deep and an emotional connection. However, Jawa had struggled because she was a child who was adopted. So she's always grown up feeling, okay, somebody's going to abandon me. Somebody's going to leave me. I'm not good enough. Nobody's good enough to love me. And that's how she treats her entanglements, relationships, situationships as such, so that she can have an easy out, so that she doesn't have to be too invested into somebody to where she gets hurt, right? So then she can do the hurting first. So it was easy for her, even though Sean's first preference was Kayla. It was easy for her to get wrapped up into Sean, because once again, her preference was black men, right? Typically, Nick is not her type. However, Nick was the one, though, out of all the men in the villa that pursued her hardcore and was, nice to her, was good to her, and everything else. However, she got sucked into her type temporarily. And one thing I did appreciate with Jawa was that she was always upfront and honest with both Nick and Sean, right? She was not playing games with either one of them. She was telling them, listen, I like you. However, I need to sort out my feelings with Sean. Sean, I feel like we have a connection. We have chemistry. However, I've invested a lot of time with Nick as well. There's a lot of an emotional connection there as well that we've been building upon, but it ultimately has to come to a head, right? Because you're towards the end of the retreat and a decision needs to be made, right? So I did, looking back, I am glad she got in the bed with Sean, even though I was like screaming at the TV, no, girl, don't do it. Don't do it. But it woke both Jawa and Nick up, right? Nick realized he, verbally was, saying out loud that he was in love with her and he didn't want to be without her and everything else. And I think for Jawa, she liked the fact that, finally there was a black man in there that was pursuing her. But it was basically after Kayla, chose, to pass on him, right? And not only that, there wasn't enough time for them to really develop anything for her to just completely jump ship from Nick at that point. So then Lana steps in and is like, hey, we need you to decide, okay, is it going to be Nick? Is it going to be Sean? And it's just so funny because her and Nick have, Jawa and Nick have broken so many rules, you guys. But it was so passionate watching them kiss and everything else, you guys, and whatever else they were doing. But it was very steamy, you guys. And ultimately, she ended up choosing Nick, and they had this date. He's telling her he loves her. They finally get the green light to kiss and everything else since wearing the watches. And, ultimately, they become the winners. Winners 6-1, by the way, from everyone in the villa, right? Which told me everything I needed to know was that they were going to be the clear winners no matter what. Because it seemed as though, number one, Nick was winning no matter what, because he really made an impact in that villa and seemed the most genuine out of everybody, and really seemed to be there to find love and to maybe change some of his ways. And he really, from the moment he got there, was all in on Jawa, right? And so it was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful to watch their connection and their journey. And then Jawa I'm happy. I'm fine with her winning because she also learned as well, right? She immediately, learned that she needed to let go of, looking at physical needs first. She had to let go of her past issues of, thinking somebody's always going to abandon her, and really trusting the process and trusting what she has with Nick is legit, is real, is all those things. And when I saw how hard other people in the villa were fighting for Jawa, to really see who Nick really was, I was like, oh yeah, they're going to vote for her and him to win if that's the case. And I see some people upset online that, are like, well, if you break the rules, if you cost them money, you shouldn't win the show. But isn't part of the show being about making mistakes and then ultimately, seeing whether or not you learn from them? Right? But I would have had a bigger problem if Kayla and Seb won, because that was tit for tat foolishness that they were doing, right? You just don't, consciously just blow 40K like that, right? And immediately have sex at the moment anytime a new bombshell comes in. That is not productive behavior, right? And it was only ultimately when it was reciprocated that, they decided, okay, we need to stop, right? So there was that. But let me know your guys' thoughts. I want to know when this reunion is coming. Please, I hope it comes next week. I know typically for Too Hot to Handle, the reunions don't air on Netflix. They usually air on YouTube or on the Instagram page. So keep out for that, because it looks like all of the cast is currently in London, which I presume either they had some type of rap party or might have just recently filmed the reunion. So because I really want to see if Nick and Jawa are still together, because there's some rumblings on social media to where everybody's like trying to figure out what is the tea, right? So there is that. But please let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you're notified the moment I post new content on my channel. And with that being said, I'll talk to you guys again very soon.